Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to talk about something that I hope you'll find interesting. It's about how to achieve really big things. And I've been very lucky. In my life, I've gotten to meet people who have achieved or been the catalyst of really amazing things. And you'd be surprised at, how few people it takes to change a whole culture. And I was in the environmental movement, and in Washington, D.C., I would meet people who, they just changed people's minds. One guy, I won't say his name, I don't even know if he's alive still, but there were these individuals. This guy and a small group of people stopped a whole interstate highway loop. And, a lot of environmental work has been more or less defensive, but I also met people who created really large projects, like a $2 billion watershed restoration program that affected the water supply in New York City. And another guy who did a $200 million project, all financed by a corporate bond. And this restored the watershed around the Panama Canal. It was one of the biggest for-profit ecosystem restoration projects that people may have heard about. And there's actually billions of dollars of good things happening in the world that we almost never hear about because the media, they make money from conflict, and we're doused in conflict. We're submerged in conflict because we have a kind of what is the right word? As human beings, we're kind of, we're attracted, like how we stop, if somebody's been in an accident on the highway, we want to gawk and look. And so the media makes use of that kind of low-level programming and never really gets to anything uplifting or inspiring. But you're here because you are inspired and you want to do big things. And these two things will really help. So the first thing is visualizing the world in which the problem you want to solve is actually solved. Like, what does that look like and feel like? And we have to imagine that in that world, there would be a whole economy around that. And it's pretty interesting to note, like, we're not the first generation to worry about the environment. And my father told me stories. He was born, he's dead now, he was born in 1918. But St. Louis, Missouri, where I was born, used to be incredibly polluted. And the air was just full of black soot. And it was so polluted that a famous place, it's still there now, called Shaw's Garden. And it's an in-town arboretum. And it has this wonderful geodesic dome, one of the first ones in the world, from a long time ago. And it was so polluted there, though, that they were afraid that all the trees would die. And the people who were involved with that, they set up something called the St. Louis Arboretum way out in the county where they thought the pollution would never get there. But oddly, enough people got upset about what was going on, and the city of St. Louis, they got the will together to revamp the entire energy supply so that people stopped burning coal in the way they were doing, and the air got clean. So it is possible. And even back then, that kind of stuff happened. And obviously, we have a pretty big need for clean air, non-polluted air. Climate change, it's carbon pollution and methane pollution. Sometimes it's a little hard to get people excited about that because you can't see it. But there's air pollution that you can see all around the world already. So getting the will together, right? The world that you and I want to live in, the air is clean and the water is clean. And that should be a natural state. How we ever allowed ourselves to get to this state is a mystery, but it's really our job in our generation to turn it around and to bring the most essential values of life into the mainstream of the economy. And I've been working on that my whole life. And Vegan Launch is the latest iteration of that. So you visualize, who would imagine back then in the early part of the last century that one problem would be solved. But then there's a whole economy around not only solving the problem, but then maintaining it in the new state. And that's the kind of companies that I like to see people building. You're looking off into the future, 5 years from now, maybe 10 years. But I like shorter goals now. And you were looking off to solve a big problem, and it's like, okay, this problem is solved. What kind of businesses exist? And those are the businesses that we start today. Now, the other thing is a little more esoteric, and I learned this by, I co-founded and was the co-director of what became a small national environmental group in Washington, D.C. And most movements have a self-identification. It comes from the political bent. And we decided we were going to do the political thing. So there we were. Our office was 3.5 blocks from the U.S. Capitol building. And pretty soon we fell into the normal habit of most movements, is that we looked at the Congress and we said, well, here's good guys and here's the bad guys. And we were trying to get the good guys to gang up on the bad guys. And you see that today in the political narrative. And we did a lot of work. A lot of good work is done from that framework of good and bad people and, pointing fingers. That's especially in the environmental movement or other places, it's, there's always the list, who's the good politician and who's the bad politician, and trying to shame people and essentially using shame as a methodology. And the thing is that we worked for 10 years. We set a goal of passing a law in 10 years. And in year 10, I had a sense of what we needed to do to actually pass the law. And I really couldn't find a lot of agreement in the movement, and even in the organization that I had built, because I had built it along these lines. I thought, we really need to drop the whole us versus them mentality, because I realized that how are we going to influence people if we won't even talk to them like a human being? Like, if we can't be in the same room with somebody, if we're demonizing them, how do they feel? Like, at a very human level. And I had this very interesting epiphany because my first son, I have 2 sons who they're now adultish, they're 18 and 22 now. But so my first son, around this time, he was 2 years old. And I had a stereo. Back then, those little boxes with knobs and dials on them. And I saw him fiddling around with the knobs. And I said to him, don't do that. And so he stopped, and I turned around. And then a few minutes later, there he was. He was at it again. And we had vowed not to use violence in our family. We wanted to see what it would be like to raise kids without the use of threats. And so there he was. I told him the right thing to do, and a few minutes later, he was back at doing the wrong thing. And in that moment, I had this realization. I thought, this is like the U.S. Congress. We've been trying to tell them to do the right thing now, and they keep doing the wrong thing. But like the fact that my kid was doing the wrong thing, I still loved him. That didn't affect my love for him at all. And I thought, what if I could bring that level of love to all the members of Congress who were doing the wrong thing? Let's just say, when I say wrong, that's right and wrong. They're not doing what I want, right? They're doing what they want, and I want them to do what I want. And that's what we're all activists here. We're trying to change the world. We want the world to look like what we want. And what we want, who really wants pollution? But at a subtle level, there's a certain agreement to that. Because some people want something more than they want clean air. And they want something more than they want healthy forests or healthy oceans. And so as economic leaders, if you're watching this, you're an economic leader of some, you're involved as an investor, as an entrepreneur, or a cultural change person. We're trying to transform the economy so that people don't need to make that decision about whether they eat or pollute. When you get right down to it, that's one of the basic decisions that so many people make every day. It's like, well, I know this is the wrong thing to do, but my family comes first. And, I can give a lot of examples of really fascinating. You can see it in your own life if you look around. How many decisions do you make because they're expedient? And we all do. But as economic leaders, can we create a better economy and a better framework so that we're not making messes that we have to clean up each time? So what am I really saying? So item 2, if item 1 is to visualize the future, item 2 is to approach the whole thing with love and to really not view the vegan movement, those are in or out, or the environmental movement, those are in or out, or any other movement as the enemy. And politicians make a lot of hay out of the us versus them thinking, and that is used to rationalize everything that we've ever done to hurt another human being. Because we dehumanize people, then we rationalize war and everything in between, whether it's the way we treat people around us, our families, in our communities, the way the politicians work, the way we relate to the politicians. So dropping that and coming up with a holistic approach where we have, right, as vegans, we're wanting people to be compassionate for animals. And yet, the practice of bringing compassion to human beings, those are the hardest animals to have compassion for. But when we really look, when I really realized what was going on, it's like, wow, okay, I was educated in a certain way. I had certain life experiences that make me think the way I think, that make me want to create the world in a certain way. And those people were educated differently. And if we really wanted to change them, we really need to get a much broader cultural agreement than can be gotten by politics. Politics does not really drive culture. I think I've said this in other videos. Politics is a battle that's kind of on the edge of politics. So when we approach the condition holistically, then we see beyond politics. And so it's not a surprise that the people who are remembered most in history, for the most part, were not politicians, but people who worked outside of the political system if they were going to make change. And maybe they tried to move the political system, but to move the political system, you have to move the culture. And that's why in 2001, I left the nonprofit political realm and decided to move into finance, because finance is really, it only works in the economy, right? You can only finance things that people are willing to pay money for. Now we've got a real meter. How far are we in changing the culture? And the beautiful thing that's happening is that the vegan ethic is really changing the culture. It's growing quite rapidly. And why? Because it offers so many benefits to the individual, right? We're trying to get people to make change. The people that try it, if they're serious about it, holding the notion that animals deserve to have their own rights and then living from that is just a beautiful experience, and it leads to all kinds of other positive experiences. So we bring that, it's really hard to, once we got it, it's that old habit of seeing the others as wrong, that, oh, you didn't get it yet, there's something wrong with you. That's not compassion. So we have to go back and to be able to talk to the people who we dislike. That is an amazing opportunity. And when you really can drop your inner dialogue and hear what they have to say, in my experience, amazing things are possible. And so with the combination of visualizing the large-scale result and being able to listen to people who are the most opposite from you, those two things together really create a massive opportunity for change. And so I really appreciate you listening to this video. And please feel free to leave any questions or comments below. Talk to you later.